because they're only within 20 degrees of the equator. I've been traveling the world collecting cocoa pods. In your bag, you also have a little box. Gold if it's for one person, silver if it's for two. These are the 2 chocolates that we're going to be making today. So don't eat them yet. When I start to make them, I'll ask you to eat them so that you'll know what's being made right in front of your eyes. Okay, are we ready? First of all, let's talk a little bit about how to taste chocolate, because my goal, oh wait, I'm sorry. We have to do a thank you to Dr. Dave Hornbrook for giving us the bags. This is the best cosmetic dentist in town. Not to say that after eating a lot of chocolate, we're going to need him, but in case you need somebody, he's our guy. When we're tasting chocolate, we want to make sure that we're in the mood. So we want to be quiet, sit down, and be comfortable. No alcohol, please, right now, because I want you to be fully aware. If you want to have some soft music going, put the cat out, at least I did, dogs outside, so that you can just have a full, kind of like a spa experience here. Let's have a sip of our lemon water. When we're tasting chocolate, we're looking at a lot of different things. Now you have your chocolate tasting terms. These are just suggestions. There's nowhere that it says that you have to look for all of these tastes. And you also have a wheel, which has suggestions on taste. And you have a sheet for where you can write things down, just like you would do a wine tasting. So you write down on it which country is your first taste, and it doesn't matter. Just make sure that it's not the one that's 100% cocoa. Doesn't matter which one you do. And my goal is that while I'm talking about history or how to make chocolate, that you're just sitting here eating away, just enjoying the chocolates and being surprised by this one has a little raspberry in it. This one has a little earth in it. This one I get a mushroom taste too. Where'd that come from? It's okay if you don't like some. It's okay if you like some more than others. Write that down. There's no wrong answers. And this is just for you to learn how to taste chocolate rather than eat chocolate. They're 2 very different things. So when we're going to taste chocolate, one of the things that we look at first is, what does it look like? You see, most of your chocolate is real shiny. Well, that is well tempered. But in your bags, you have one that's in there that isn't quite as shiny. It's a little grayish. This piece is a year old because I bought some of the chocolate a year ago and found it. And I wanted you to see the difference. There's nothing wrong with this chocolate. It's not this shiny. It doesn't look as good, but it still has the snap, and I'll let you decide about the flavor, if that works or not for you. But first we're looking at it. Is it shiny? Is it grainy looking? Does it have little bumps on it? That would be the sugar coming out. Does it have swirls of white? That would be the cocoa butter coming out. And that would be if it had been stored improperly. If chocolate gets more than 100 degrees, maybe 110 degrees, the cocoa butter starts to release. And that's when you get what's called chocolate bloom. And the butter content just coming out. Doesn't mean it's ruined. So it really takes a lot to have to throw away chocolate. Now we're going to smell it. Well, okay, there's a smell. Let's try another way. Take your thumb and rub the chocolate. Do you see it changing? Is it getting on your thumb? No, I'm not going to ask you to smell your thumb. But now smell the chocolate. Does it have more of aroma? Very slowly, just inhale. Let it fill you up. Now, what did you think of that aroma? Was there anything noticeable to you about it? Now let's see the snap. Let's break a piece. Did it snap? Can you hear that? The snap means that it's properly tempered. When you have chocolate that's been around too long, this one still worked. It might not have that crisp snap to it. When you eat a piece of chocolate, you want to get that first original snap when you bite into it. Sometimes you'll have an inside which is liquid or at least it's very runny. And when you bite into it, you get that snap, and then you get the luscious taste from whatever the filling is. It's a good time to talk about the difference between chocolate and candy. When you're eating a piece of candy or confection that has a filling, which can be any flavor in the world, that is a confection or a piece of candy. What you have in front of you now is chocolate. So we're doing chocolate tasting, but we will be making some candy. So it's kind of funny if somebody says, well, I'm a chocolate maker. Really? Do you do bean to bar that you make the chocolate? Some people do. Or are you a candy maker? There is a difference there. So we felt that snap, okay, from when we just broke it in. Now, are you getting ready to taste? Pick one. Did you write down which one are you going to try? We looked at it, we smelled it, and now I'm going to tell you what to do before I do it. I'm going to ask you to take a piece of chocolate and chew it. Don't swallow, just chew, and kind of like bubble gum, then put it on the top of your mouth. Make a wad of it, like you're trying to save your bubble gum for later without anybody knowing. You go put it on the top of your mouth, and you're going to move it around. Your taste buds in different parts of your mouth pick up different tastes. So we're going to move it around to see what taste you get. You might want to go to your taste chart or your taste list and see if that helps you to get some ideas about what you're tasting. I taste something, I don't know what words to put to it. This might help you. We're also going to breathe through the chocolate. While you've got that mound on the top, on the roof of your mouth, open your mouth and inhale so that the air goes past that chocolate mound. Then your breath will take it up to your nose. So you'll be tasting it and smelling it at the same time. Ready? Let's chew. Now let it melt a little bit. Breathe it in. Take the tip of your tongue, and they call it worrying. You're just gonna wiggle it around with your tongue, and you're helping it melt within your mouth. My father used to take a piece of candy, throw it in his mouth, and go, that was good. That's why I decided to become a chocolatier, because the difference. Yes, it might be good, but when you take the time to really eat it and really enjoy it, you get so much more out of it. And remember, bad candy, bad chocolate is the same calories as good chocolate. So when you're eating, eat the best that you can get a hold of, the best that's available and that you can afford, and enjoy it. We're going to enjoy this so much that you're going to be surprised that you're not really eating that much, but you're going to get so much more enjoyment from it. After your first taste, before you take a drink, let's look for those aftertastes. Are you still tasting it? So what are the aftertastes that you're getting? I still have a warm chocolate going on there. Now, if there were a lot of additives in the chocolate, they might be coming out. And you might be getting kind of a musky taste to it. Or you might be getting a chemical taste to it. The piece that I picked is rich and yummy, and I'm still just getting a nice little chocolate glow. If it was a Hershey bar, unfortunately, you would be getting almost a metallic chemical taste. Because Hershey bar calls itself chocolate, and because it can, but it only needs to be 10% cocoa mass. And the rest is all additives. So you're not going to have this nice follow through that you get from here. So you keep eating slowly. Let's take a sip of the matcha tea in between. It's a little bit astringent, and that will help clear your taste buds for the next one so that you're starting fresh, kind of like being a virgin again. How is chocolate made? How did we get to this? Yep, history of chocolate goes back 10,000 years. There are pictures and stone carvings with the cocoa beans. And so there's documentation going back 10,000 years for cocoa. The most that we know about is only about 5,000 years old. And that's in Mesoamerica. Mesoamerica is basically within 20 degrees of the equator on each side, going around the world. But we see the most historic data coming from South America. And the pod itself grows on a tree, and it almost looks, when it's growing and fresh, it's a bright color, and then it dries out. So it looked like a fruit, like maybe a papaya or something. And indigenous people learned, remember, like they would take corn and grind the corn. So they saw these beans that came out of the pod, and so they ground the beans. And they found that because of the warmth from the grinding, that what they ground became liquid. And so they tasted that liquid and had a bitter taste to it, but it was pleasant. And this was a time in the world where we didn't have any stimulants. They didn't have coffee. They didn't have really sugar yet. And so they drank this, a little bit bitter, and it was pretty good. And as we know, in Mexico, they would add corn to it because the corn had just been on the same metate. Yeah. So the corn got mixed in, chilies got mixed in, but it took a lot of work to do it. Because it was that much work, it was only available for the king and for the nobles. So the king, the most famous is Montezuma. And his stories about how it would give him extra energy, and he had his whole harem waiting for him. And so he would get just little cups and drink the liquid gold and throw the cup into the lake. And so it was considered to be a very rich country that you could just throw away the gold cups. And only he had the cocoa. Through the years, it became, after the Spanish came, pretty much Cortez, which was in 1502. This is your history lesson. Keep chewing. First, 1502 was Columbus, and he saw the drinking and tasted it and thought, okay, well, that's something. But he didn't go back and tell the Spaniards about it. When Cortez came in 1519, he thought, well, this is a gold mine. I'm going to learn about this. And when he went back to Spain, he not only took the cocoa beans with him, he took some of the people who knew how to make it into chocolate with him. So now the Spaniards had the way to make their own chocolate. And it was considered to be the food of the gods. That was named in the 1700s in Greek. It was a Greek name, the food of the gods, because it was only, again, the very rich, the nobles that were allowed to have it. So all of a sudden now it's becoming pretty popular, and we want to know more places, have it grow more places. So the Dutch started growing the trees, transplanting the trees in the East Indies and Sumatra. And the Portuguese even started transplanting it into Africa. Because again, they knew as long as it was within that 20 degrees of the equator, as long as it was in that rainforest, it could grow. They learned that it has to grow in a canopy of bigger trees. Peter, you found that out in Chiapas, when if they just emptied a field and put the cocoa trees there, it wouldn't survive. It needs to be in the canopy of larger trees to help protect it. 1701 is when sugar was added in Oaxaca. So now it started to get really exciting. And the Spaniards took that back to Spain. It was a thick drink with sugar, and it might have had corn in it. And the Europeans went crazy. So even to this day, the people who grow the cocoa beans aren't the people who make the chocolate. It's changing now. Like, we do have chocolate that comes from Ecuador and that's actually processed in Ecuador. But most countries that grow it don't actually make it into chocolate. So that's what was going on here. The beans were being grown in the new Americas, in the New World, and they were being processed in Spain. And then they started being processed in France and in England. In America, in 1765, Geri started processing chocolate. And some of the names that we've heard of before, 1765 is when Baker started making his chocolate. And that's the one that was a pure chocolate without any sugar in it. Chocolate bars came in about 1885, and that was Hershey. Hershey said, let's find a way to transport this. Let's monetize this a little bit more. And that's where the Hershey bar came. And then after that, Geri learned how to make cocoa powder. And that was kind of by mistake. When we go to how to make chocolate, I'll explain how that happened. In the last 10 years, chocolate has become more gourmet, where people want to know what is it that they're eating. We talk about chocolate percentages. All I see is your hands. We talk about the percentage of chocolate. We talk about where does it come from. And so we are really becoming much more discerned consumers, which I think is really good, because we're learning what we're eating. It's just like we're told that with any food, always read the label, know what you're eating. A good chocolate really is just going to be the cocoa bean, a little bit of sugar, and sometimes they use lecithin in it as a stabilizer. It doesn't, and maybe vanilla, doesn't have to have a lot of other things to it. So the percentage means that's how much of the cocoa mass is in it. So what is cocoa mass? Well, that comes from how it's made. So now we've got some pictures for you. We're going to take you to a jungle where the cocoa trees are growing. That's your cue.
Hold on 1 second. I have to take this back again. Sorry.
So the cocoa trees themselves aren't big trees. And the cocoa pod doesn't grow like fruit hanging down. It grows on the side of the trunk of the tree. And when it's growing, it'll be bright colors and they're beautiful. And inside of it,
Give me 1 second, Jerry. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to make myself a post again. I'm sorry.
we're
on talking.
chefs and chocolate makers, not filmmakers.
I know. Just 1 second, please.
So keep eating your chocolate.
Keep eating your chocolate. They couldn't see you, so that's why I had to change the cameras. How do I get me out?
Jerry, can we ask a question while you're doing that?
Absolutely.
How did you sneak in these pods into the United States of America?
Well, one of them, this is funny. One I picked up at the Dole Pineapple Farm in Hawaii, and I wrapped it up in socks. I put bags around it, baggies, and then put it in with my socks. You know, I use those cubes when I travel, and so that nobody could smell it because you have to go through ag. And one time I was coming home from Bali, and I had a little refrigerator carry-on, and I wrapped it and put it, and I had a lot of processed, chocolate bars and coffee that I had bought, and a lot of products that I had bought there that had a lot of smell to it. And so I wrapped this up and put it in the middle of there. But yeah, I've always been very cautious about sneaking. When you come from Mexico, you don't have to sneak. And the best place to get stuff is really in Oaxaca. They have so many chocolate stores where they have all the different kinds of beans. Now you can see
Nice.
the world of chocolate. All the chocolates that you're looking there, I made. So see, we all can become chocolatiers.
Works of art. Gorgeous.
Aren't they beautiful? To me, they are. I just saw a company that had beautiful chocolates and they were selling them for $80 a pound. And then I looked at mine and went, But I don't sell my chocolates because then people want what they want when they want it. And I might not want to be making them right at that moment. So I just make what I want to make and then give it away. And it makes everybody happy. Okay, so let's now go to the jungles. Okay, these are random pictures from being debarred. That beautiful woman in the middle, she's in Bali at a candy store. And the top left picture is ice cream from Bali. Down below is where I'm making chocolates. Here, oh, I saw the chocolate pod. Come back, chocolate pod.
Yeah, up there.
There we go. There is your cocoa pod. And see how it's growing on the tree? It's growing from the branches, it's not hanging like a peach would or like a lemon would. The cocoa pods are harvested twice a year, and they have to be hand harvested. A tree might produce 50 pods in a year. A pod is going to have between 20 and 50 of the nuts inside of it. So it depends upon what kind it is, where it's growing. Chocolate is definitely something where the taste changes because of the earth, the terra. That's what gives us its flavors. That's why hopefully by now you've been seeing some differences in the different chocolate that you've been tasting. They're from different parts of the world where the ground, the earth is different. There's different minerals. There might be different watering schedules. And that's why it has the different taste to it. Unfortunately, when we look at big commercial companies, they put so many additives into it because they want it always to taste the same. And when you're working with going to a small place that you're getting this from Ecuador, it used to be we'd get a lot of chocolate from Venezuela. different times of the year, it would have a different flavoring to it. Just like wine, there are merging, there's where you mix your cocoa, you mix the seed itself to get different tastes to it. Okay, so this is the pod, this is how it's grown. And next picture, please. And this is how it's harvested by hand. Each pod is cut off of the tree very delicately, because if it breaks open, then it could get infected. So it's harvested very delicately. Next, please. And then by hand, it's scooped out. When it's fresh, it has a white fibrous foam around it. And this stuff is delicious. It has a very tropical taste. It starts fermenting as soon as it leaves the tree. That's why we never get it here to taste. When you're in a region that is actually growing the cocoa, they make drinks out of it. Peter, I bet you've tasted it many times in Chiapas. The beans are all split open, and with the white foam around it, they're put into buckets and baskets and sit to ferment. They have to ferment, it's a natural fermentation, and they ferment for about 7 days. Next, please. After it's fermented, the white has kind of disappeared, dried up and disappeared, and now they're dried off. They're dried in the sun. And this is done at the farm itself. It's very important that the beans keep moving, that they keep changing the position so that it doesn't get any fungus to it, so it doesn't get mold underneath. Again, that's a problem when you're working on one of the great big plantations in Africa, that they're done mechanically, and some of the beans might sit too long, and then they would have a real fungusy taste to them. To hide that taste, they would put in additives and sugar. The small farmers take great pride in drying the beans in the sun. And then those beans are packaged off and sent to, a lot of them, to San Francisco, because both Guittard and Geri are processing in San Francisco. And a lot of almost every European country processes their own chocolate. Remember, the cocoa trees don't grow in Belgium, but they make some really good chocolate, as does Switzerland. Next, please. After the beans are received at the processing, if you look in the little small picture, you'll see that they're being willowed. Take your beans. Come on, let's play with your beans. And rub them in your thumb. And you'll find that there's an outside shell that you can take off. When you take that off, the inside part is darker and hard. This is a nib. This is the cocoa nib. It's very edible. The beans that you have are not roasted. And so they're very mild flavored. After they've been sent over, then they're going to be roasted. In the roasting process, that's when the husk is going to come off. And it's kind of a fun machine. It's got air in it. It just kind of the way you do rice. The air takes and the outside will go flying up and out. And the nib, which is heavier, will go down to the bottom. The nibs, and this is after roasting. So after roasting, it's really easy to take that outer crust off. Right now, you might be having a little trouble with it on the raw beans, but keep trying because it's worth it, so that you can taste that. Next, please. Oh, I'm sorry. In the picture you see that shows the chocolate. After they're roasted, they go through the conching machine. The conching machine is just like what the women used to do with the matate, but these are with great big steel rollers. So it's a lot more pressure, It creates a lot more heat, just the constant movement. And that's what creates the chocolate mass, the cocoa mass. Cocoa mass is 100% cocoa. It's just the ground up smashed beans. And this is how it was discovered to take out the cocoa from the butter. While some processing was going on, one of the employees had a cloth bag of cocoa mass, and he hung it up and he went home overnight. In the morning, they found a puddle of white liquid on the floor, and the only thing that was in the bag was the dried cocoa. So that's how they separate the cocoa butter from the cocoa powder. Ironically, cocoa butter is more expensive than cocoa powder. And the reason that almost all processors and all manufacturers separate it is because then they can control it. They can control how much cocoa butter is going into each product. The beans themselves are about 50-50. When you're using a couverture, when you want to put it on the outside of a piece of candy so that you get that really nice snap to it, and it's real easy to work with, you might want it to be 60% cocoa butter. So by separating them, it gives the manufacturer a lot more control. That's why if you ever go on and look to see what does Egutard have available to you, you'll see hundreds of different varieties of chocolate, and each one has a little something different to it for whatever they're making. So this is the beauty of it, the cocoa mass. And that comes from the conching. Okay, and here's back to your tasting terms, because remember, hopefully you're still eating. Thank you very much. I think we're done with that. So now that we know how we end up with the chocolate, before we make candy, we're going to temper the chocolate. Tempering is truly taking it up to a temperature and then bringing it back down. It's playing with science. At a manufacturer, you'll see big machines doing it. You can do it by hand. It's controlling the temperature. When you're working with chocolate, always please use a double boiler. And keep in mind, chocolate does not like water. If you add water to the chocolate to thin it, instead you're going to end up with a piece of fudge. You're going to end up with just a hunk of hard mass that isn't necessarily really nice. Certainly don't throw it away. You can do stuff with it. But you want to keep water out of your kitchen. One time when I was just starting, I decided to make orange truffles. So I took some frozen orange juice and put it in. I ended up with a big clump of chocolate. Well, I've since learned to instead add orange liqueur. You can always add liquor. You can always add oils. You can always add dried fruit because there's no liquid in there that's going to it, but no water. So are you ready to start cooking? Okay. Do you see yourself up in the back top corner? I can.
Okay, I need a little bit of help. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to get so it should work. I don't know what to do. Give me 1 second, Geri. I'm gonna need a second, okay?
Okay.
You can pin her video.
How do I do that, dear?
If you go up to the right-hand corner of her screen, you click on the 3 dots and you click pin, and that should pin for everyone. And you can change the pin based on the camera you want to.
pin.
Or spotlight. It might say spotlight for you.
Can you see her now? Is that
Yes.
Do I look like I'm ready to cook?
Can you see her now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, thanks.
so we're gonna start by making truffles. Oh, first, I forgot to show you. This is a concise history of chocolate. Okay. And this is the continuation of the concise history of chocolate, showing chocolate in Europe, how it developed in each country. I personally own over 100 chocolate cookbooks, and that's just the start. I mean, if you go online and you just type in chocolate, it's absolutely overwhelming. The reason, of course, is that everybody loves chocolate, and we talk about it a lot during Valentine's Day because chocolate does the same thing to your brain that being in love does. It also, I'm told, Sabrina, you'll know this best, that it does the same thing that hashish does. So in France, when a woman is feeling just a bit melancholy, then she might go to her doctor and say, oh, I just didn't feel like getting up today. I don't feel like going out. One of the prescriptions will be to every day go to the store and buy one piece of chocolate. Because in France, for her to get up and go to the store, she, of course, would have to get dressed and put on her makeup and put on her hat. And she would walk 3 or 4 blocks to her favorite chocolatier. And she might get one piece and she'll sit down and people will visit with her and she'll visit with them. And she might have one piece, she might have 2 pieces. And then she'll get up and she'll walk home. By the time she gets home, she feels much better. Of course, it was the chocolate, had nothing to do with the fact that she got dressed and saw her friends. So I really believe that we can cure a lot of things with chocolate. And even if you don't get cured, at least you're happy trying. So I said there's a lot of books about chocolate, and one of the purest forms is a truffle. Now, the idea, it's called a truffle because it kind of looks like what a pig might dig up from the earth. And that's where the term came from. But truly, a truffle is just an inside, a filling, which is made of just chocolate and cream. Like anything else, it can become anything that you want it to be. I've seen some that have basil, some that have different herbs in them. Some recipes include, include egg yolks. Some recipes include butter. I've seen some that include corn syrup. I gave you a recipe that is probably about 30 years old, very pure. I just use cream and chocolate. And it can be from 70% cream to chocolate to equal amounts cream to chocolate. And it depends upon how thick you want your, the consistency of the ganache, of the inside. And remember, you can add anything you want to it as long as it's alcohol, oil-based. You can put in lemon zest, but not lemon juice. You can also infuse the cream because you're warming up your cream, and you can infuse that to get your flavor. Okay, so we're going to start. Sorry, this wasn't warmed up yet. When making the ganache, I'm gonna start you backwards because this stuff has to warm up and it wasn't. But you can end up with this ganache, which is just cream and chocolate, was made 3 days ago. You'll see what, after you see what I make today, the difference on how, because it sat for 3 days, not in the refrigerator, how it comes together. If you can see really good, you'll say, that looks a little bumpy. It doesn't look really smooth and shiny. This has pieces of sugared ginger in it, just because I like that. So the purest form is just taking, scooping. Scoop and roll. And in cocoa powder it goes. Now I always sift my cocoa powder just so that I don't end up with a lot of lumps in it. This particular batch, I put some chai into it. I just wanted to have that flavor. I liked it. Again, 1,000 recipes, 1,000 ways to make it, and it's all whatever you want to do with it. It's fun to have people over. So why don't you go ahead and eat your truffle? Take a bite and notice, I think I'm gonna have to do some more things, and notice the texture. Can anybody tell me what flavor it is? Is there a flavor? You guys want to try some?
It's my name, Maria.
These are truffles that you can make at home. You don't have to temper anything. You just use cocoa powder. Now, I am doing one of the things that I'm going to tell you to never do, and that's I put the chocolate into the microwave to melt. The very best way to melt your chocolate is in a double boiler. And the best way to make a truffle is to just put the chocolate in the double boiler and get it to where it melts. Now, my sister had told me to mention, and this is very true. If you look, it still looks like chips. But once I start stirring, you notice that it's melted. So if you're using a microwave, please check it every 5 to 10 seconds, because when you look inside, it will look like, oh, it hasn't melted. And that's why chocolate chip cookies still look like it has the chip. It maintains its size, its shape. So we don't have to completely melt it because I'm going to put warm milk in it, or warm cream. And this is kind of a magic thing. I'm going to put enough cream in it. It's like, how is this going to ever end up looking like this? Through the magic of TV.
You want to hear what the flavors are saying?
What the what?
The flavors are getting from the truffle.
Oh, yes, yes. What flavors are we seeing?
Grand Marnier, Bailey's cream, amaretto, whiskey.
There is an orange flavor in there. And I'll tell you, sometimes I'll make something and it's like, well, I didn't quite like that. So I have a batch that started out as orange truffles and another batch that was pear champagne truffles. And when I put them together, they were fabulous. I never use an artificial extract. Because artificial taste you cannot get rid of. There's nothing wrong with just using chocolate and cream and putting vanilla in it. Can we somehow get to where we can watch this? Yes, thank you. This is kind of the magic. Watch how it goes from ucky to Can you bathe in it? Probably. Is it good for a facial? Absolutely. Look at the difference in the texture. Let this sit covered for 3 days. See, I'm not going to tip this one over. And it will harden up on its own. And that's when you can make it into the truffle. Now, if you wanted to put it into a shell, you could at this point. So when you start tempering your own chocolate and you use chocolate molds, what you do is you'll temper the chocolate, cover the mold, put in the ganache after the chocolate itself, after the tempered chocolate has hardened, cover the top, and then it should come out easily. This is the same ganache that's inside here. And you put it in when it's you don't really want to put it in when it's warm because you could melt the chocolate, but you do want to put it in when it's liquidy.
Oh my God, thank you.
What did you use to stir that, Geri?
What did I use to stir it? You mean this, or this is just a immersion blender? Don't use a hand mixer. I did that the other day and I was washing it off the ceiling because the liquid on the top is very light and it just went shooting up. I oftentimes, if I'm making a big batch, I'll put it into my mixer, to my stand-up mixer. And I've been known to have a batch going, have the mixer on, leave the room for a minute and come back 3 hours later and it's been on all that time. It's so silky smooth. It does not hurt it by leaving it on too long. But you do have to let it sit overnight, at least covered. Some recipes will say you can put it in the refrigerator, and you can, but I've just found that the texture is better if you let it just sit by itself. Then you're going to roll it in a ball, throw it in your cocoa. Now, you don't have to use cocoa. You can use ground nuts. You can use coconut. You can use chai. You can use any combination. All you want to do is to make sure that you're enrobing it, that you're enrobing that magic ball in something. So you can enrobe it in chocolate itself. You can dip them in chocolate, right? This is enrobed in chocolate. If you can really tell. And these are enrobed in cocoa. So who's going to ask me whether you use Dutch process or non-Dutch process? Who knows the difference?
I will ask you. I don't know the difference.
The difference is an additive. If it's Dutch process, there's an additive so it's not as bitter. Because remember, cocoa is just straight ground up bean. There's no sugar in it. There should be no additives at all. Dutch process will be milder because it has an additive and it won't clump. Some people like one versus the other. Some don't tell the difference. A lot of times a brownie recipe will say don't use Dutch process because it comes out to be a richer, darker color. So if you see two cocoas and one is lighter than the other, it could be that the lighter chocolate is the Dutch process than the other. Don't confuse cocoa with that which you make hot chocolate with. The stuff we make hot chocolate with already has sugar in it and milk solids. And if you want to, though, you could use that on the outside. If you don't want that bitter bite right when you go into it, you can use the cocoa for chocolate milk. It will be sweet, and it won't have the big punch. So, did you eat your truffle?
Truffles were delicious. Okay, what kind of liqueur was in it?
It was an orange liqueur.
Oh, it was an orange liqueur. Okay.
An orange liqueur.
That was delicious. I like your screwball ones too.
I know. As I said, there's no limit as to what you can do. The screwball, I
Samples, right?
what?
You're sending samples, right? For
Yes.
those of us,
Well, so we're gonna have to come here. Okay, you guys, so Roz and I have known each other since we were like 7 years old.
no, a little older.
Okay, maybe 12. And we used to get up at midnight and go make brownies. So she was one of my first chocolate compadres. We did get in we didn't get in too much trouble. Well, that people knew.
No, later we did.
And my sister's watching, she knows about the trouble that we got into. This is the best double boiler. I'm not going to tell you to go out and get one because they're crazy expensive. But you want to use a double boiler for your chocolate so that water cannot get into it. There's nothing wrong with just putting one pot on top of another. Remember, it's the steam that heats up the part that your chocolate is in, not the water. So shouldn't be wet. Okay, right now we're making the rocher. So you can cleanse your palate. Starting fresh. The rocher is basically nuts and chocolate. Now the nuts, this is so fun. You have to use the slivered nuts. They're a little bit more expensive, but it does make a difference. So we start with the slivered almonds and experiment with other nuts. I haven't because I'm so happy with this. Take the slivered almonds and then we soak it in an orange liqueur. This happens to be an orange brandy from Israel. You can use Grand Marnier. You can use a nut flavor. You can use an almond flavor liqueur, whatever you want. But what you're going to do is put the liqueur into the nuts. And then you put powdered sugar over it. Now the recipe tells you don't put the powdered sugar into the same bowl because you don't want your powdered sugar just to become really icky. So you cover, the recipe tells you how much powdered sugar over these wet, soggy nuts. And they really are soggy. Then you put them in your oven and you toast them. And while they're toasting, you can smell it. And this is what you end up with. When it's this roasted color, that's when you take it out. Here, try some of these. Now I have found that people like just eating those nuts. They have a little bit of orange flavor. They're sweet and crunchy. Brochet is so easy. Take the nuts that have been roasted. You can hear, listen. Hear how crunchy that is? Now, if you look at your brochet, it's a really thin chocolate layer. My chocolate isn't quite that thin. So that's why the recipe tells you to add cocoa butter. Remember we talked about that? That's when you're hanging up the mass and it drips on through. Well, cocoa butter is expensive and it's difficult to get. So I came up with this. I have coconut oil at home. Only if you like the taste of coconut and if you're not allergic. You add coconut oil because coconut oil does harden. Right? So once you're done making it, it will become a hard chocolate. If you used butter, butter doesn't get quite this hard. And I would never use a vegetable shortening. And again, it doesn't get quite as hard. And you stir it up into your chocolate, the coconut oil melts at a lower temperature. Look how this changed. It became, and this is the viscosity, right? It's now, I don't know about you, but I think that this is beautiful just to watch. So it's now much easier to spread it on the chocolate. The recipe is very specific about how much to use. I find this to be a very forgiving recipe. You can have more chocolate, you can have less chocolate, you can have dark chocolate, you can have milk chocolate, you can combine your chocolates. In fact, all your little chocolate pieces that you have left, if you didn't finish them all, you can melt them and do this with it. And all I'm doing is covering the nuts. You can cover them thickly, you can cover them thinly. I even made some where I put ginger pieces with the nuts, and that was pretty good. You can put any kind of dried fruit, and you're just going to put it in to a cup. Okay, eat your rocher. I know, Eileen, you've already had a few.
How did you know that? I was like, already done.
These are so good. And there you go. Here you guys go.
Thank you.
They pop right out. Something, again, you can do at home. You can buy these nuts at Trader Joe's in 8-ounce packages. You want to impress somebody, very easy to do. This, again, will sit overnight. I don't like to refrigerate them because sometimes in a refrigerator you get moisture. So if you do want to refrigerate them, let's say, oh, I want to serve it an hour, it won't be hard. Cover it with plastic wrap. Make sure that no moisture gets into it, and then it'll be fine. So now it's your turn to ask questions.
I have a few questions here on the chat.
Okay.
Let me just go through all of them and then we can open it to everyone. Sabrina wanted to know when sugar started being added to chocolate.
I saw that. Sugar started being added in Oaxaca in 1701.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then, let's see. Indeed, happy chocolate. Oh my God, liqueur whiskey, amaretto. I don't think I have any more questions in here. Oh, what temperature is the cream?
The cream doesn't come to a boil. So it's like a simmer.
And they wanted to know how you were using your immersion blender, right?
And the immersion blender, you have to make sure to hold it down at the bottom, because otherwise, or if you tilt it, it goes all over the place. And it's pretty exciting when that happens, but only if you have somebody else cleaning up after you.
Mhm. They want to know what happens with moisture gets into your double boiler or in the fridge.
If moisture got into the chocolate that I was melting in the double boiler, I would have one glob. Because again, moisture is water. Water is an enemy of chocolate.
And then what is the best way to add chocolate flavor to chocolate?
To make it would be
Coffee flavor.
coffee flavor.
Yes.
Coffee flavor, you can infuse the cream. You can put coffee beans into the cream. You can use espresso powder. Don't use coffee because, again, that has water in it. And then we would be changing the whole consistency. So if you wanted to add it to the ganache that has the cream in it, then you can add it to the cream, not coffee, but espresso powder or a coffee liqueur works really well. I mean, Kahlua truffles are wonderful. I like Kahlua milk chocolate truffles. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I like cream in my coffee.
What is your favorite chocolate candy to eat and to make?
I knew that question would come. So what is my favorite chocolate is whatever I've just discovered at the moment. I really like the brands Callebaut, which is from Belgium, Verona, which is from France. I find that the easiest chocolates to get a hold of that are a good quality are from Trader Joe's. If I'm going to just eat chocolate, it depends on my mood. Sometimes I'll eat the Cadbury Easter eggs because they're a really nice milk chocolate that I like. I rarely say, oh, I want a specific thing, I'm going to make it. I'll do that for ginger because sometimes I just have a ginger craving. I tend to not eat C's candies. Would never eat Whitman. Sorry, guys. Ethel M's has some good candies in it. I do not like the U.S. Godiva. I like European Godiva. Cadbury is very different in Europe than it is in the United States. Cadbury isn't allowed to be called chocolate in England because it's a different process. They make it the way that you make caramel. They make it in big copper vats, and they cook it with the cream. They cook the chocolate with the cream. So it's kind of the way that you would make a toffee. And so they don't call it chocolate. And that's part of how they get it to be so creamy and good.
How can you store the chocolate and where do you keep it? Must it be refrigerated?
Chocolate does not have to be refrigerated. It should be stored airtight. So you wrap it up really good in cellophane. It needs to be stored somewhere where it's less than 80 degrees. So like don't put it in your garage. because in San Diego, sometimes our garages can get too hot. So anywhere that you could store wine, you can store chocolate, but you want your chocolate to always be airtight when you store it. If it has nuts in it, it will go bad. Nuts themselves have oil in it, and the oils go bad. And I don't know how they do it. It's going to take a scientist. But if you've got something with nuts and you open it up 6 months later, you'll have bugs in it, even though it was a closed box and even though it was wrapped up. I've been told that there's larvae in the nuts themselves. That's why, well, not that, but I always toast my nuts before I use them for any reason. It also brings up the oils of the nuts and the flavors. Chocolate will easily last a year. And as you saw from that piece that was just off colored a little bit, it still tasted fine, didn't it? It still had snap. I'll find some stuff that's like 5 years old, and sometimes it's still good and sometimes it's not.
What is the brand of your expensive double boiler?
It's a French one. And don't know. It's a copper double boiler. I bought it at Great News. And 20 years ago, it was $125. So it's copper and porcelain. It's cool.
Really cool.
But I think you can do the same thing with 2 pots or a bowl on top of a pot.
The Dutch cacao with additives, should I put it off or do you still use it at times? And part 2, if the recipe says to use Dutch, is it just a taste or is there a difference with the non-Dutch?
The difference is the Dutch has a mellower taste. So the only times that I've seen it called out has been in a chocolate cake or a brownie. And oftentimes it'll say non-alkaline, that they didn't add the alkaline because they want that richer flavor and that darker color. The Dutch will have a lighter color to it. So if you're doing something with milk chocolate and then you're gonna use cocoa powder itself, then you might use the Dutch process for that because it'll be a lighter color. I personally don't taste a difference in baked goods. And I just use whatever I have.
So it doesn't change the science of the baking at all. It's more of a flavor.
No, I haven't seen that, no.
Thank you. This is Sabrina. I appreciate the sciencey question.
I know, I haven't seen it, but I'll ask Sarah, my cooking teacher, my baking teacher, because she would know that better.
Thank you.
Question.
Do you agree that if love had a flavor, it would be chocolate?
Oh, that's so cute. Do I agree that if love had a flavor, it would be chocolate? Of course. Of course. Okay, and now another question usually asked is what wines go with chocolate? So if you're having milk chocolate or like the Rocher with nuts, I think Prosecco is really good because it's light and sparkly. And if you're having dark chocolates, I don't think there's anything much better than having a glass of port with some good rich chocolate. That's the flavor of love.
Great. Do you like to use Ghirardelli chocolate?
I don't like to use Ghirardelli chocolate. I don't know why. I don't like Ghirardelli. I do like Guittard. Guittard chocolate is made for the baker and for the chocolate maker. And they don't make candy. They don't make anything else. They just make chocolate, and they have a lot of different varieties that you can use. In the Bay Area, because that's where they are, you can go into the grocery store and buy a 2-pound box of Guittard, different flavors. You can get them online. Ghirardelli is just not my favorite, and I don't know why.
What about Schaffenberger?
Scharfenberger I used to love, but it's now owned by Hershey's.
Oh.
So Scharfenberger, they were winemakers, And I mean, I followed them when they were new and they were in the Berkeley area, and you could go watch them make the chocolate, and bought a lot of their chocolate. It was a very fruity flavor that it had, which I love. And they did what they wanted to do. They became big enough of a brand that they were wanted. Hershey's bought it to be their outstanding chocolate. And they use the same beans that they use for Hershey. So it doesn't have that fruity taste to it anymore because they're not sourcing their beans the way they were. Peter and I've talked about that with sourcing the beans in Chiapas, which has a very different flavor. Did you get different flavors from different parts of the world? Am I seeing any nods? Vicky did.
Yes.
Yes, you did. See, that is tasting. Now, I'm not going to ask you to close your eyes and tell me where something comes from, right? But that is you've taught yourself to taste and to say, yes, this has something in it that I like. This has something I don't like.
When is the best time of the day to eat chocolate?
When you're awake.
Anytime.
And if you're holding a piece of chocolate and it melts in your hand, like happened to Claire yesterday, that's very specific. It means you did not eat it fast enough.
Do you ever use Baker's chocolate?
Do I ever use Baker's chocolate? Sure. But remember, Baker is a brand, right? Henry Baker in Boston. And he only makes 100% chocolate. Did anybody try the little 100% disc? I'm not seeing any pout faces. Take just a little teeny and you'll see. Now, I think it's a real good idea to take all your little pieces that you have left, throw in those darks, just a few, melt it up and make yourself something with it. Whatever nuts you have, whatever fruit you have. There you go. Put some alcohol with it and have fun. One thing that I often do if I'm doing something and it's just not coming out exactly perfect, I'll make a bark and just lay it out flat. You know, this chocolate, okay, what am I going to do with it now? I might just lay it out, throw nuts, cherries. Again, Trader Joe's has some lovely dried fruits and nuts on top of it, and they're great. In France, I think they call them pistolas, and they're beautiful little candies.
I like to put a little piece of dark chocolate in my oatmeal in the morning.
Dark chocolate in your oatmeal, of course. Or dark chocolate in your coffee in the morning. Yeah, I've discovered that instead of getting cocoa powder for chocolate milk, I'll just put some dark chocolate at the bottom of a cup, get the milk hot, stir it up, and might even put a little bit of chai in it. And it's like the best hot chocolate. And there's no cream in it. You still get that richness.
How do you prefer percentage of chocolate?
Percentage, of course, remember we talked about the cocoa mass. So the higher the percent, the more cocoa mass, or it's also called chocolate liqueur that are in it. So depends on where it comes from. Some are going to be really have a more bitter, rich taste to it, the higher your percentages are. Some 85% have a mild taste. From Bali, and 85% is still pretty mild.
I love chocolate with salt. What is the best candy to make?
We always think of caramels with salt. I like making the little pistol, just a piece of chocolate that you melt, you put some fruit, and then you use a finished salt on top. Not just table salt, but a finished salt. There's the salt that's sliced, and so it melts into your mouth. And I think that's really good. Almost anything like these rochers, you could put some finished salt on it. Remember, when you're putting a finish on, you do it from high above so that it goes out equally. Okay. And remember, there is caffeine in chocolate, but it's a different kind of caffeine than it's in coffee. And its half-life is very short. So you will all sleep very well tonight and have chocolate dreams. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much.
Excellent job. This was amazing.
Thank you. Back again.
Thanks, Jerry.
You're a pro, literally. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Geri. Thanks for sharing all your knowledge.
Yeah,
Bye.
We got the whole neighborhood here. We're gonna be happy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was great.
Everyone. It was awesome. Nice
Super
job,
fun.
All right, how often?
Yeah.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thank you, Jerry. Nice presentation.
Sorry about the technical problems. I'm learning Zoom, but I think it turned out great. With chocolate, nothing can be bad, right?
That's right. That's right.
Thank you
Great.
for coordinating. Thank you, everyone, friends and LEI.
Gary, how often do you do these?
This is my first. But if we're finding an interest, Marilyn and I were talking about opening Jerry's Chocolate Kitchen and doing a YouTube
Ah,
for this because it's fun.
yeah, it's nice to be able to talk to you though, which you can't do with YouTube.
Oh,
But
but it's also, Roz, did you get chocolate and chew along?
I did. I bought stuff at Trader Joe's.
Good, because that really
I
does
used
help.
about 4 different ones. Unfortunately, they all have a lot of stuff in them. So I would rather be able to get the pure chocolates. And
Yeah,
I'm gonna try some of the stuff we have from the bakery.
yeah,
'Cause I've a little bit of that stuff, and Adam gets pure stuff to add into things from somebody up in Northern California.
yes. See, that's a lot of chocolate is made in Northern California.
Yeah,
Oh, and something I was going to tell you about organic, because I'm sure Adam is using organic chocolate. He's a vegan chef, pastry chef. And most chocolate that is grown in South America on family farms is organic, even if it's not certified organic. Because
oh, in,
a lot of the family farms cannot afford to get certified.
yeah,
Peter,
everything we use is certified because it has to be.
right, he has to use certified, but don't be afraid because a lot of them can't afford to be certified. Yet chocolate, when it's growing, the cacao, the enemy is a fungus to the tree that has to be cut out of the tree by hand. So it's mostly the big plantations and especially those in Africa where they have the airplanes fly over with the pesticides. In South America, the smaller plantations don't do that. And that's why it's become so important. What is the source?
Yeah, and most of it's coming from South America is my understanding.
Yeah,
So that's good.
that really is a much more controlled grow. Thank you.
Geri.
Do they-
Happy Valentine's Day.
Jerry, this is Sabrina. Can I ask a question? Or are we done?
Oh, always for you.
Oh, thank you. Now, I'm curious if you've ever done the nuance of, you know, how certain coffee beans, for example, will have certain tasting notes depending if it's Orwell or New World. Have you ever noticed if cacao beans from similar regions have similar tasting notes?
Yes, just like I was saying in Bali. I went to like 3 or 4 different manufacturers and they all had a similar taste to it. Wasn't my favorite, but it was all similar. Yes, that was
Makes sense because of the terroir. I was curious.
It really is. I would love to do a bean tasting trip down, down to South America.
All right, when are we going? Just kidding.
I think Peter could arrange it for us.
I'll volunteer for that one.
Thank you, Jerry. This was great.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Geri.
Chocolate done as fair trade or only coffee?
I've not heard of fair trade. Peter, do you know? Fair trade chocolate?
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah, Maria says yes, that it does.
There's some farms that are.
Oh, good. Then that part of that may be what Adam is getting to. Because if it's fair trade and the small family plantations, then he knows they're not using pesticides on
Right,
it.
because they become collectives. They work
Right,
together. The families
right.
together in a community and they become a collective, and the collective then gets a designation
They get paid.
Right.
and they get paid better prices.
Is
Yeah.
there anything other than coconut oil that you can use? If you
I-
don't like the taste of
Trader
coconut?
Joe's Organic. But that's only if you like the taste of coconut in it. Otherwise, you
Right.
use cocoa butter.
And if you can't get cocoa butter, just regular butter will do the same
No.
thing?
Well, because regular butter doesn't get hard enough.
So what can you substitute? Anything else?
That gets really hard. Otherwise, you'll just have a soft, mushy candy. You won't have the same texture. Okay, bye
So
guys.
those are the only two things that work, huh?
Yeah.
I don't remember what we did for saving. Right. So you gotta turn it off, the recording. So off. Oh.